Hey guys, RC here. This is a one-off video with OOTP17. Probably will apply to 18 as well, but this is actually for the guys in my online league that I'm a member of, the HBL. It's a semi-stats only league. We have a $5 million salary cap. And there's been some issues over the last few seasons now that we're kind of getting into some depth with the league where some guys are having financial trouble, including myself. Um, so I'd already recorded an episode once, but I didn't like the length of it, so I'm going to redo it and try to streamline it a little bit. Uh, this is a 9-year snapshot of my team, Springfield, in the league. The green is the revenue and the red is expenses. So keep in mind we have a $5 million salary cap and there's a $2 million cap on cash on hand. All right. So cash, if you think about it, is kind of like overdraft protection for your checking account. You've got a $5 million checking account limit, and then you can use this $2 million to go over that, but you don't want to exceed that too much, and you want to try to keep it as high as you can, because this is what determines your availability for free agent signings and contract extensions. So let's take a look at my 9-year history here. So if we look at the green, and I forget exactly what year I popped into the league. I think it was somewhere around 02, 03. But so we had 7.6 million in revenue, 5.3 million in expenses. So literally, I made $2.3 million that year. Well, if you're at 2 million, you can't get any more. Basically, your owner pockets that money as profit. However, you can see here in 05, my expenses, while they were down, my revenue dropped immensely from 6.4 to 4.9, $1.5 million drop. So I broke even that year, but then the next year I actually went upside down, and I had a loss of $900,000 roughly. And so that comes right out of your cash. So instead of having 2 million, I now had 1.1 million. And I was at this point not aware of this. I had no idea. And I know some other guys are in that ballpark too right now. So the next year, I had 3.1 in revenue, but 4.8. So I lost 1.7 million. Well, you only have 2 million on hand, but you can go into the negative. So we had the loss of 900,000 this year, 1.7. So now I'm at 2.6. So that wipes out all my cash reserves and puts me $600,000 in the red. At that point, I was unable to sign contract extensions. I was unable to sign free agents, nothing. Okay. And I think this is the point a lot of guys are finding themselves at. So last year, notice that my expenses dropped from 4.8 to 3.2. So dropped 1.6 million. All right. Now this is year to date. So don't worry about that yet. We'll look at this year in just a minute. But my revenue went back up, so I turned a profit of $1.2 million. Well, the owner kept a little bit of that, but I'm sitting at $1 million cash right now. That's in 1 year from being $600,000 in the negative. All right, so that shows how quick you can recover this, but there are drastic measures that have to be made. All right, now let's get out of the history and let's look at the actual. There's 3 things that I look at and that I have learned that I need to look at, and that is your cash, and then the revenue and expenses. So 2008, it shows last year. There's my 1.2 million, and it's your revenue minus your expenses is your profit. Okay, if you're profitable, you're adding to your cash or replenishing your cash. If you're below 2 million, if you're above 2 million, then you can have this break even. If you're below 2 million, then you kind of want to turn a profit to build it back up. If you're in the negative, then you need to drastically cut this to maximize profits. It doesn't have to be done in 1 year, because you can see if if you're in the league with me, I paid a big contract for John Hall this year, $650,000 a year, and I'm 2 years removed from not being able to offer any free agents at all. And if you look at this year, I look at the projected, not the year to date, because we're not adding in everything. Now, media is identical for everybody. Okay, so right now I'm projected to make 5.7 million, and I'm projected to have expenses of 4.4 million. So 1.3 million in profit this year, plus the 1 million I'm sitting on in cash. I'll be back at the maximum $2 million cash on hand. I'm going to accomplish that within 3 years of of not even fully understanding, but just kind of grasping these basics. Okay, now what do you control here? Well, you control everything in your expenses. Okay, player payroll, that's the salaries that you pay each player. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a minute. You control your developmental budget. Now you notice I was 125 last year, I was 160 this year. If we go to player development, the average or the baseline for the entire league is 200,000. I'm at 160. I think, at 250 when Tyler, the commissioner, kind of explained this to me, and I went, "Oh, okay." So I cut that to 125 last year. I was well below the average, but that saved me from what I was about $140,000. Okay, so now I'm still 40,000 below the baseline, and I'll tweak that up year to year now as long as I can do it. But that's an immediate savings. Okay, whatever you cut that's an immediate savings out of your expenses. And as I said, player payroll, that's the biggest chunk. Okay, you don't control any of the media. Merchandising, I don't think, is locked in. That's based on your popularity, your interest, and the type of players you have on your team, how popular they are locally and nationally, that you'll pick up maybe more merchandising, because you can see I went from 183 last year, and I'm projecting a little over 200,000 this year. So you can control that by winning, having popular players on your team. I'm willing to bet most of that additional money is John Hall jerseys that are going to be sold. All right. So where do you get the big jumps? Well, gate revenue. You see, I'm up just a little bit. That's based on your average attendance. Okay. Now your green box here is your season tickets. Actually, it's yeah, because if you look, I had 4,468 season tickets last year. I've got 6,700 this year, which is about that green line. So that's the minimum attendance I will have all season. Last year it was down here. All right. Salary is a fine line, ticket prices, but ticket price times each ticket sold is gate revenue. Okay, so that's where that comes in. Now you can see I've had serious growth here in all my categories. More season tickets, more attendance per game. All right, so my revenue's up 27% just from that. All right, and that's what leads to this increase here. How do you fix that? You win. You win. That's basically it. You don't finish last. And I finished, pretty close to the bottom for a few years. I'm still not doing well. I mean, I'm 5 games under 500 just after mid-May. We're 7 weeks into the season, and I'm 8.5 games out. I already know, I can already tell I'm not going to win this year. I'm probably not going to make the playoffs. Heck, I just had my best sim in probably 3 sims, and I went 500 at 4-4. But it can still translate into more seats. Now you can see I've been trending down lately in game attendance because I'm losing. Well, that's probably going to maintain, but just like in real life, when the Yankees come to town, you see a bigger gate. So when the Lafayettes and Cedar Rapids come to town, hopefully I get higher gates like up in here and see some spikes. Um, if you're the more competitive you are, the later in the season, you'll start seeing that tick back up over that 10 to 12,000 range. Okay, so that's what you can control with performance. And really, the only other thing you can do is cut salary. Okay, um, cut your developmental budget as little, to as little as you can. And not exactly sure what that does. I just think it makes it harder to develop your players in your minors. Okay, but I've got so many young players in my majors. I'm not looking for anybody to really come up right now for a couple of years, probably. Although I don't want some of my 24, 25-year-olds getting much older in the minor leagues if I can help it. That's why I tweaked it up this year. Um, so it comes down to balancing payroll. Now let's talk about that for a minute. All right. If we go to my team salaries, and I don't know how much of this you guys can see in your game, and honestly, it's for trying to help people, so I don't care if you can see it. There's really nothing I don't think I'm giving away. If we look at our calculator, this 200,000 figure is a per player average, and I get that by taking 5 million, which is our salary cap, dividing that by 25, which is our 25-man roster. And that gives us an average of $200,000 that we can pay per player. Now, just like real life, you're going to have some players that make more, some players that make less. Okay, now I mentioned John Hall. I signed him to a $650,000 a year contract. So he is basically worth or getting paid the equivalent of 3.5 players. Okay, now he's got 1 share, so that other 2.5 players, I've got to free up that salary somewhere else, which means I've got to have $450,000 in savings somewhere else. Okay, and I do that by having $55,000 players, $90,000 players. Okay, because every I need savings in a group of players to equal that $450,000, and that's just to maintain your $5 million salary cap. If you need to cut salary and be below that, then this is not your average. Let's say that your revenue, and we'll come back to this in a second, but let's say your revenue is only $4 million. Okay, well that means you need to be at 4 million or less to be able to make a profit to start building your cash back up. All right, so we have 4 million in revenue. All right, we're going to subtract out 160,000. That's for my developmental budget, and I want to make $600,000 in profit this year. Crud. Hold on. All right, 4 million minus 160 minus, and I want 600,000 in profit. So that means I can have a payroll of 3.2 million divided by a 25-man roster. Now my average salary is only 129,600. Okay, so you have to figure out what your revenue is and plan your expenses accordingly. Okay, so let's go back to here. So now if that's the case, I shouldn't sign John Hall. I couldn't afford him. But I've structured his contract in a way because I know I have a large number of young players that are going to be on a league minimum through this 2011-2012 season. Large number of them, okay? So out of these guys just going down, Kip Crawford's probably going to get re-signed. Juan Estrada will probably get re-signed. Hopefully he stays around that 200,000 league average. Andy Jones I want to re-sign because I really like him. Roy Moore is going to actually go back to a minor league contract, so that'll save me 55,000 there, which basically repays my screw up for Estrada this year. Palma's going to have to get re-signed, definitely. So what I did is I made him a player option for the third year, but then a team option for the fourth year, which means at the time all of my bonus babies are falling off and I start having to pay them, I've got his whole salary that I can then sink into 2, 3, or even 4 of these guys and let him go if I need to. Now, if I've done my finances right and I'm maxed out at $2 million and I'm still turning a profit even at a $5 million but payroll, if I can max out and still turn a profit, okay? Because right now, look, I'm making what, 1.2 million. If I go up another 800,000 and max out my payroll, I'm still making $400,000 profit this year. Now, I didn't want to do that because I still want to rebuild my cash to the full 2 million, but I could go 5 million and still turn a $400,000 profit. Once I have 2 million in hand, then I can do that, and then I'm not throwing away a ton of money. That $400,000 profit will not come to me. My owner will take it. But I'm not throwing away $1.5 million. So the more money you have here and the more you can afford because of your revenues, the more you can afford to spend and then use this $2 million for a year or two to pay a little bit extra to get that one player if you wanted to. I planned this to where I already know in 2012 he'll be 41. I could probably cut him. It won't cost me anything because it's a team option, and that frees up that money for other people. Okay. Pruitt, I just benched him last sim. I probably should not have re-signed him last year, but I liked his 37.91 potential. I don't like the fact he hits in the low 200s. If he could hit 267 for the whole season, I could probably live with that, but he's hitting at the Mendoza line this year. So he probably doesn't see the end of his contract. I cut my third baseman, Lucas, who was making, I think, 450. He turned out to be a bust. I gave him a bad contract. He busted out. And luckily, because I'm making so much profit, I went ahead and released him. Now, keeping in mind that 650,000 gets factored into your payroll, into your expenses, okay? And you have to eat that every year. So it's an extra salary that I've got to carry. So, you've got to plan accordingly when you're signing guys, when you're figuring out how much to pay people, how much you can afford to pay. And if you're really struggling in turning the profit and being less than $2 million, because if you can't afford to make a free agent bid, odds are your cash is zero. You're busted. I mean, you're actually in bankruptcy if you want to use that term. Your franchise is bankrupt from financial mismanagement. Now, the reason I did this was not to poke fun, because I'm in the boat with you guys. I'm still there. I'm in the process of rebuilding this, but I wanted you to be able to see how I took the information that I got from other people in the league and how I kind of made it make sense to me, in hopes that maybe it will help you as well. And if you look at the moves I've made with my team over the last few years, I've gotten rid of all my high price guys. Randall Murray, gone. Daniel Williams, gone. All of those high price guys that were carrying my franchise are gone. And yeah, my team struggled immensely, okay? But I made some, what I think hopefully are good draft picks. I have a very young team, and you saw that in the salaries. I have a large bulk of my team. In fact, I've only got 6 guys this year making at or above the average salary of 200,000. So everybody else is drawing that back down to help pay for these guys. Now, you have some teams that have one player making $800,000, whatever it might be. The higher that goes, the more you've got to cut back everywhere else. Um, I already know Galloway I'm trying to trade, so that's basically 200,000. Chang has not been in my starting lineup. That's 100,000, so that's 300,000. David Miller's going to be gone, so that's 400,000. All right, so the three guys that are actually out of contract this year, I'm either going to let walk or I'm trying to trade. Okay, put them on waivers, see if anybody picks them up if you're that hard up for the cash, because then that just gets their cash completely off your books. And then already next year, I mean, you have to start thinking ahead as well. And look, it doesn't take a lot of time. It really doesn't. But, Victor Krieger has been, I picked him up to be a stopgap guy as a free agent. Yeah, he's been like rock solid. He's actually assumed my closer's role. And he has, now this year he struggled a tad, but he's still been really solid. And last year he got the closer's role about mid-year, and he's been really, really solid. So he's going to be my closer. He's probably going to get one more contract out of me at his age. So I'm already planning for that. I just don't know what it's going to be. Hopefully not over 300,000. That's kind of my budget for him. But I'm already looking at saving 400,000. So that's to re-sign him basically. Judd Matthews, I've got him. That's 300,000. That may turn out to be a bad signing. I was desperate for catchers this year. And as it is, I've already sent him down to the minors and called back up Kip Crawford, who's he's been playing for me since he was 22, probably a little too young, but he's just starting to hit his prime. So, when he comes up, hopefully I can get him relatively cheap, that 100 to 120 range. And if he turns out to be what I'm hoping he is, then this guy's gone because that salary will pay for hopefully 2 years for Crawford down here. So you have to start balancing how you're looking at guys, evaluating what they're going to do to your payroll. And this tells you, okay, so right now I'm at 4.5 million for this year. Well, that's basically right here, 4.5 million. That's all in right here, rounded off. So it's your projected minus your projected revenue minus expense is the profit or loss that you're looking at. Profit gets added to your cash, losses get subtracted from your cash, and even though you may have payroll salary cap room, for example, like last year, this year right here, my payroll is only 3.1 million. So you look at that from the surface and you go, okay, well the salary cap's 5 million. I've got room for 1.9 million in salaries, but I was so far in the hole from these 2 years, I didn't have any money left over, and I could not. It would tell me you don't have any money for free agency. You cannot make an offer. And I know there's teams like Oshkosh has been saying, I can't even bring up a $55,000 guy, but that's because he's right up against the $5 million payroll. So it's all a balancing act. You have to, how close do you want to walk to that $5 million edge? And in his case, he's right at it. If he didn't have injuries, that wouldn't be an issue. But because he's had, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 injuries, he's actually been playing with a 20-man roster because he can't afford to call anybody up, because when you call them up, what happens? They go from a minor league contract to $55,000. If you don't have the room, you can't add anything more. So, you've got to leave yourself a little wiggle room. You've got to leave yourself you've got to be always analyzing what you're averaging in attendance, what that's doing for your gate revenue. Um, so even right now we're projecting to finish even with the slough off or the decrease in attendance, I'm still projecting to finish over 2 million, which would be about 150,000 higher than last year, which is fine. That's what I'm looking for. Am I going up or am I going down? Okay, now if I start flatlining here, that number may go down and I may have to reevaluate. Okay, and and this could change during the course of the season. Literally, this is one of the first screens I go look at every sim or every other sim just to see what's transpiring. Okay, um, to see where I'm at, how things are tracking, and always with the goal of wanting to turn a profit. Now, do I need to turn 1,000,002? No, I mean I'd be happy with 600,000, 400,000, but because I'm still 1,000,000 away from my cash cap, I really want to do this right now because again, I'm thinking 2, 3, 4 years down the line when all these young kids start having their contracts come due, and I'm going to have to bump my payroll to sign them, which means this may stay the same. This is going to increase, and that's going to limit my profit potential. I want to be back at my 2 million max before that happens, which means I need to get there this year, next year at the latest. If I can turn this 1.2 million this year, I'll be there. Not a problem. Um, and I'm so young, I don't really see unless somebody transcendent like Hall or Cravens hits free agency again. But I think what you're going to see, and Herb had alluded to this before he left, and Tyler's talked about it as well. As we are progressing as a league, and we're all getting close, we're going to start seeing more of these budget hits that we're all having to deal with, and that's going to lead to teams like me having to trade away our star athletes like a Randall Murray. It's going to be players having to let go a super, all-star player like Cravens, at the second baseman, going to free agency this year. So we went through this long stretch basically since the start of the league where no really good players hit free agency. They were all 38, 39-year-olds that nobody wanted anymore. And, this year was really the first real year that we've seen big name players hit free agency. I think that's going to become a little more what we're dealing with if teams are legitimately looking at these. But I wanted to show you how to look at these numbers. Again, Tyler helped me out to understand this, and I thanked him for that. But I've kind of taken his information and looked at this is how I look at it to help it make sense to me. And it may not be 100% accurate. It may not be the be all end all. I'm sure it's not. And I'm sure there's a ton more depth that you can go into for analysis in here. But those are just really the baseline numbers to show you what you're tracking, what you're trending, and how to turn things around. And again, you do have to sometimes tighten the belt, and I did, so you can see, shaving off 1.6 million that year, and then this year it is going to be higher. I mean, we're going to go up about 1.2 million. So we're going to actually be back closer to this year. My hope is that my revenue tracks much higher. I'm looking at about $1 million more in revenue. Or more. Now, it may be that, that if I only end up at 4.1, I'm going to be screwed because that's going to be, that's going to be tough. So, I can't really afford to flatline here. I need to get some revenue back up. Of course, if you make playoffs, so much the better. You can add a chunk of money there, but that's not something that we can guarantee. Only 4 teams are going to do that each year. So, I want to be competitive and playing meaningful baseball games. And if I can stay within 10 games all season, as we get past the halfway point, I'll see an uprise in my attendance. It won't sell out every game, but I mean, I'll be back to this kind of structure right here where I'm up and down, but in this 10 to 13 range, and I can live with that. That'll keep me very happy and on projection here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. If you have any questions, ask them below. Ask over at the forums for the league as well. Again, this is mostly for guys in my league, but if you're not in the league but you play OOTP, hopefully this helps you kind of understand what it is that you're looking at when you're dealing with a salary cap and a cash-strapped team when you're unable to offer free agents or anything else. So thanks for checking it out, guys. To my league mates, hope it helps out. Take care.